Hey everyone, I guess by now you've all realized how this Dear Listeners newsroom thing is going to go. You're going to go to YouTube, you're going to see me talking about yet another acquisition in the games industry. I can't control it, you can't control it, but here we are yet again, and this time Sony has bought Bungie. We'll be diving deep into what this means for the gamer. Also, the Nintendo Switch sets new sales milestones. All this and more on this edition of the Dear Listeners newsroom. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Dear Listeners Newsroom, TRG's weekly news recap. My name is Micah Hendrick, and here are the top headlines for February 4th, 2022. It began with Insomniac and Bethesda, continued 2 weeks ago with Activision and Blizzard being acquired by Microsoft, and now Sony is further consolidating the industry by acquiring Halo and Destiny developer Bungie for $3.6 billion. While this is the latest move to shock the industry, Bungie CEO Pete Parsons and PlayStation head Jim Ryan were both extremely direct about what this means for current Destiny players, and that future Bungie games would not be bound only to PlayStation consoles. Independence is something that Bungie has greatly valued in the past, so this deal sees Bungie coming underneath the Sony Interactive Entertainment umbrella as opposed to the PlayStation Studios umbrella. Indeed, after making the announcement on the PlayStation blog, Jim Ryan immediately addresses this fact, quote, "First off, I want to be very clear to the community that Bungie will remain an independent and multi-platform studio and publisher. As such, we believe it makes sense for it to sit alongside the PlayStation Studios organization, and we are incredibly excited about the opportunities for synergies and collaboration between these two world-class groups," end quote. Pete Parsons was also calming fan fears over on Bungie.net. In a blog post, he said, quote, "We remain in charge of our destiny. We will continue to independently publish and creatively develop our games. We will continue to drive one unified Bungie community. Our games will continue to be where our community is, wherever they choose to play," end quote. Bungie even went as far as to publish an FAQ chock full of questions that generally ask the same thing. Will existing players be missing out on Bungie content now that PlayStation owns them? And the resounding answer was no. This brings up the question then of why would Sony spend so much on a developer who will continue making games for non-PlayStation platforms? The answer can be found in Sony's fiscal 2021 results, which were released on Wednesday. It turns out Jim Ryan and company have grand live service and multi-platform aspirations. When speaking about the Bungie acquisition, Sony writes, quote, "The strategic significance of this acquisition lies not only in obtaining the highly successful Destiny franchise, as well as major new IP that Bungie is currently developing, but also in incorporating into the Sony Group the expertise and technology that Bungie has developed in the live game services space. We intend to utilize these strengths when developing game IP at PlayStation Studios, and as we expand into the live game services arena. Through close collaboration between Bungie and PlayStation Studios, we aim to launch more than 10 live service games by the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2026, end quote. This is a stark change in strategy for a company who has relied heavily on single-player, third-person action-adventure games. Over-reliance on this genre has been a primary criticism Sony has seen for well over a generation now. When you couple Bungie with recently incubated second-party teams such as Deviation Games, Firewalk, and Jade Raymond's Haven Studios, it starts to become clear how Sony can not only maintain their existing single-player franchises, but also add new multiplayer and live service games as well. Other advantages that Bungie specifically offers Sony is a vast wealth of expertise and technology in the live services space. Jim Ryan sums it up in an interview with GamesIndustry.biz, quote, "We have an aggressive roadmap for live services, and the opportunity to work with and particularly learn from the brilliant and talented people from Bungie that is going to considerably accelerate the journey we find ourselves on," end quote. On the flip side, Bungie not only gained strong financial and human resource support from Sony, but also opportunities for their IP to go to TV and film via Sony Pictures. Pete Parsons spoke to GI Biz about the two companies' shared vision and opportunities to expand their IP. Quote, You can't help but look at Sony's accomplishments, not just as a great platform and having easily some of the best development teams in the entire world, but also one of the greatest entertainment companies in the world. We saw this great opportunity to build not just Destiny, we're working on more than Destiny, these great interactive experiences which we think we're good at, but also being able to explore these worlds even more, end quote. Jim Ryan also tells GI Biz that we should expect even more acquisitions in the future. Quote, "We should absolutely expect more. We are by no means done. With PlayStation, we have a long way to go. I will personally be spending a lot of my time with Pete and the team at Bungie, helping make sure that everything beds down right and that autonomy means autonomy. But elsewhere in the organization, we have many more moves to make," end quote. With Microsoft and Sony continuing to make headlines over these major acquisitions, many fans have wondered where Nintendo sits on this topic and if they're in the market to buy any prospective developers. Well, we finally have an answer. Nintendo President Shuntaro Furukawa addressed the issue in Nintendo's recent earnings call, saying, quote, "Our brand was built upon products crafted with dedication by our employees, and having a large number of people who don't possess Nintendo DNA in our group would not be a plus to the company," end quote. A pretty direct answer from Nintendo leadership, and one that shouldn't come as much surprise. Nintendo has long marched to the beat of their own drum and left Sony and Microsoft to squabble over the quote-unquote AAA gaming space. Speaking of Nintendo, their aforementioned earnings call brought with it some great news for the Nintendo Switch. Nintendo announced that the console handheld hybrid has now sold over 103 million units, which surpasses sales of the once mega popular Wii console and Sony's PlayStation 1. With trajectory still strong for the Switch, it's expected that it will overtake the popular PlayStation 4 console and possibly even the Game Boy family of handhelds. While overall earnings were down compared to the previous fiscal year, it's not too shabby considering you're comparing it to the year Animal Crossing sold over 30 million units. 2022 marks the 25th anniversary of beloved JRPG Final Fantasy VII. With Final Fantasy VII Remake being so well received, it has many fans clamoring for when we can expect more info on Part 2. Speaking at a recent anniversary event in Japan, original Final Fantasy VII director Yoshinori Kitase had this to say about the anticipated sequel. Quote, "With regards to the long-awaited Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, there will be more information this year if we can. Within the next 12 months, we want to share some information. Look forward to more information," end quote. Final Fantasy VII Remake's creative director Tetsuya Nomura even said that we can expect more Final Fantasy VII related titles in the future. He added that these titles kicked off development after Final Fantasy VII Remake's 2019 release. So whether you're a fan of Final Fantasy VII or not, buckle up because we're about to get a lot more of it. And finally today, some positive news in the shadow of all this industry conglomeration. 2 new development studios have officially opened their doors, both with strong industry expertise. First up is Gardens, a team of talent who's worked on games like Journey, What Remains of Edith Finch, Skyrim, Spider-Man, and many more. Gardens will be a fully remote studio with an emphasis on employee benefits. On their official website, the team describes their new game as, quote, "a shared fantasy adventure inspired by some of our favorite memories playing online games, particularly moments shared with strangers. Players will find themselves crossing paths in a shape-shifting, unpredictable wilderness filled with mystery and magic, featuring a timeless visual direction and tactile multiplayer play," end quote. Secondly, we have news this week that former Blizzard and Rockstar veterans have acquired a $5 million investment for their upstart studio, Lost Lake. Helmed by former Diablo and StarCraft lead designer James Finney, Lost Lake has a grand vision for a new multi-platform game. Finney tells Forbes what we can expect from Lost Lake's culture. Quote, "The name Lost Lake is a promise. Discovery, adventure, unforgettable experiences. This is a promise to players and also to our team. Lost Lake is not tied to a single platform or genre, but rather to a core belief that empowering talented individuals and fostering a culture of collaboration leads to incredible games," end quote. Finney didn't go into details about what their first game will look like, so we'll just have to keep an eye out for what the promising crew at Lost Lake can create. Alright guys, that's it for this edition of the Dear Listeners Newsroom. If you like what you saw today, hit that like button below, subscribe to the TRG YouTube channel. You can follow me on Twitter at DougsVest, follow the Reformed Gamers at TRG Podcast. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the news. We'll see you next week.